Hello everybody, I'm working on a coffee table and as you can see it's almost done. I didn't film anything up to this point because I wanted to focus on the build this time, but there is one detail left to make and that's what I'm going to do in this video. Here we have the tabletop. What remains to be done is a little bit of marquetry. So this is the final design I'm going to attempt to replicate in wood. The first step is to make a full-size drawing. I have never done marquetry this complicated. I did some marquetry on the corner table, if you saw that video. Geometric shapes, squares and lines along the edge of the top. This is going to be quite a bit more complex and I'm really excited about this. So I have now cut up all the individual sections, every part of the image that's going to be a different color, a different wood. I have numbered them so that they correspond to my sketch, so I know where each piece goes. And for the long branch I've also cut it into a few sections so that I can have a reasonably straight grain of if I were to put this entire piece onto one large piece of veneer, there would be a lot of short grain in some of these. That would be very fragile and difficult to work with. Where possible I try to line it up, so here the grain is making a curve, very nice for these long sweeping curves. Not possible to do that for every piece, but I've tried to look for things like that. The acorns I'm placing in this section. I don't actually know what species of wood this is. This is walnut, by the way. I don't know what species this is, but I'm placing the hats of the acorns in this area where there's a lot of dark and medium brown stripes. And the blob of the acorn is down here where there is no stripes, no figure, nothing, just plain medium brown. I have a piece of maple, some curly birch and a bit of mahogany. Alright, so I have cut out all my pieces, figured out the order in which I should inlay them. Some of them need to overlap. For example, the branches where they intersect the leaves, I left that wood in there instead of sawing it out and trying to get a perfect fit right off the saw, which would be very difficult. I left that material in there so that I can inlay the leaf, and then when that is flush with the tabletop I can put the branch on top of that and scribe around and inlay the branch into the leaf. So I believe that the first piece I should inlay is this piece of branch in the center, and I tried to attach it with a glue stick, which seems to hold it enough. I think I should be able to scribe around that without it moving, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm a little bit nervous because I've spent a lot of time on this tabletop and now I'm about to cut knife lines into it, but here we go. Alright, I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. I am at the last piece, the stem of this acorn. I feel like I have maybe not the process, but I have a process that works. So I'm going to film the whole thing now, start to finish, inlaying this stem. First I'm going to place a little bit of tape. It's not necessary, but it fills a couple of purposes. Firstly, it makes the line a lot easier to see. When you scribe around the piece, it's a very shallow line that can be difficult to see, especially in a coarse wood like oak. And also it helps a little bit against tearing out the fibers. It's easy to crush or rip out fibers right on the edge on the inlay, and the tape gives them a little bit more support. I'm using quick glue. I'm pretty sure this is just some sort of PVA like wood glue, but it seems to go tacky quite a lot faster, so it's convenient for this purpose. I'm really not looking to attach this permanently. I just want it to get tacky so that it doesn't slide around when I am scribing around it. So I will press it in place and let that harden for a few minutes, then I'll come back and scribe around that. So now I have a very faint knife line around the shape that I need to excavate. The first thing that I've been doing is to deepen that knife line into a little trench by coming in with a chisel at a very low angle and making small cuts very carefully so that I don't cut in underneath the tape. This is a rather slow process, especially for the larger pieces. It'll be pretty quick on this tiny little stem. On some areas I tilt the chisel to raise one corner up above the surface. That way I can cut into a radius that is technically too small for the chisel, so then I can get away without bringing out another tool. And this is a great time to practice your ambidexterity, your ability to use the chisel in either hand. Especially when working on a large tabletop, there's just no way I could flip this piece around. Every time I need to cut from a different angle, I just have to get used to holding the chisel in my left hand. And then when all those cuts are done, I come back with my marking knife and deepen the score line around here. The reason I want to make those cuts with a chisel first is because the bevel on the knife would otherwise push the blade into the knife line and make the cavity bigger than it should be. So you have to remove a little bit of resistance on the inside of the cavity before cutting the line too deep. And with that done, it's the same thing again, just a little bit deeper. So I step back with the edge a little bit further and remove a bit more material with each cut. And very carefully I try to lift out those fibers. If there's the slightest bit of resistance, don't force it. It may damage the wall. If the fibers are stuck, you can come in with a chisel vertically or with a knife again, deepening the score line further. So I think that's deep enough and mostly cleaned out. If this was a larger space, I would now come in with a router plane and flatten the bottom of that, as you've seen me do on the leaves. I don't have a cutter that can fit in there, so what I'm gonna do instead is take a little carving tool, because I have come in at an angle like that and at an angle like that, which leaves a little raised ridge running along the middle. So with a small carving tool I can remove that ridge, which doesn't make a perfectly flat bottom, but flatter. And that looks like it's gonna go in. I just have to remove a little bit more junk in the corners here. It's really difficult to clean out these points. In hindsight, I should have split up this branch in a different way so that I don't end up with all these sharp points. What you can do is carve away a little bit on the back here. That feels like it should work. So I'm going to slightly chamfer the leading edge that goes into the cavity and then put in a little bit of glue. That's way too much actually, but that's okay. Just gonna smear it around a little bit, making sure that there is glue on the walls as well as on the bottom, so that the piece is fully joined all the way around, and then we push it in. I noticed that my carving mallet is actually really good for this, but if you don't have a mallet like that, you can also use a handle of a chisel, for example. And then we want to put a little bit of clamping pressure on that, and that is a little bit tricky because this is so far into the board. I don't have clamps that reach that far, but what I've been doing is I've been putting a block like so, another block out there, and sort of bridge the gap with more pieces, trying to get these centered over the actual inlaid parts. And then if I clamp down on these parts that span the gap, that's gonna transfer the force all the way to where I need it. You get very poor leverage this way. Most of the pressure is out here, very little is here, but it's better than nothing. And this clamp is actually getting quite a lot of leverage, so that's good, because I could get it quite close to the point there. This one is gonna need to be cranked down quite hard. It loses so much force across this length. Sorry if any people who actually know physics are offended by my claims there, but I think you know what I mean. So yeah, now the parts are in. The squeeze out is on the tape and not seeping into the tabletop. Gonna let that dry and then plane it off, and then we're done. And I'm not about to let you go without showing it with finish. As I often do, I'll put on a few coats of boiled linseed oil and follow that by buffing with beeswax polish. I'm quite happy with this inlay attempt, but there's a few things I want to do differently and a few tools I want to try, so there will be more inlay and marquetry coming on the channel for sure. I know some of you are going to be disappointed, this is not a full build video. I honestly had to take sort of a break after the standing desk series. It got a bit overwhelming with so much footage to edit, and I kinda needed to limit the scope of this video. Next up should be another fully documented project though, if all goes well. Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you soon. Bye.